sociometry, sociometric theory. So remember, psychodrama is a triadic system. It has three parts: sociometry, psychodrama, group psychotherapy. So Jonathan Moreno, who is the son of Jacob Moreno, he has a really powerful quote. He says that psychodrama without sociometry is blind, and sociometry without psychodrama is sterile. And so we really need to be using sociometry and psychodrama together. And so along with that, it means that we need to be conceptualizing and using psychodramatic theories along with sociometric theories together. So one of the core sociometric theories is called the social atom. And the social atom is basically a way of thinking about and visualizing the individual within their social environment. The social atom really operationalizes social work's person and environment theory. The social atom is an exercise you can do with clients or with yourself, where you draw yourself in the center, and then you use different shapes to draw other people close to you in your life, surrounding yourself. And you would draw these shapes based on size, based on proximity to you, based on the amount of space they take up in your life. Traditionally, you would use triangles for males, circles for females, but I think we can all agree that that's pretty outdated and not very inclusive in terms of gender. So I encourage you to use whatever shape feels right for each person on the social atom, and to encourage your clients to use whatever shape they feel like for each person, rather than using that binary system that is often taught for drawing social atoms or genograms. So the social atom, once somebody draws themselves and all their relationships surrounding themselves, you end up with a visual depiction of one's social experience and their social life. And then we use lines, different types of lines, to connect the representation of the individual in the center of the social atom to others and the other shapes surrounding the individual on the social atom. Usually a straight line would indicate a connected relationship. Sometimes you might use a bold line to indicate a very connected relationship. A dotted line is often used to represent a lost relationship, and a squiggly line can be used to represent a conflicted relationship. So the social atom was created back in the 1930s, 1940s. It predates the genogram and the eco-map by several decades, and there's a pretty good chance that it influenced the development of the genogram and the eco-map, in that there were pioneers in family therapy that trained with the Morenos and then went on to become developers of different family therapy concepts, including genograms and eco-maps and social work family therapy. The social atom can be used as an assessment tool, as an intervention, and as an evaluation, all in the same tool. You can have a client draw a social atom based on a representation of a moment in their past, based on their here and now experience in their relationships, or even based on what they'd like their social atom to look like in the future. So it's a really dynamic tool that you can modify for different situations. You could have a client draw a social atom here and now, and at the same time draw a social atom for their future, what they ideally would like their social life to look like. And then you can compare the two and use it as a map for depicting what needs to change in their social life. Many times I've done social atoms with clients, and just in 15 minutes of drawing a social atom, I gain more information and insight into their social life than I would have in months of verbally talking to them and asking them questions about their social life. It's a really useful and efficient tool for assessing one's social life. You can also modify it to include other other things than just humans and social relationships on the social atom. For example, in substance use treatment, we might ask a client to not only put their social relationships on the social atom, but also to put their relationship with their drug of choice or other addictive behaviors on the social atom, and to symbolically represent how the relationship with drugs, with addiction, maybe with depression or anxiety, impacts their relationships. In eating disorder treatment, this is modified to include food or different types of food or eating on the social atom. You can also modify the social atom in strength-based ways. You could do a social atom focused on personal strengths. Draw yourself in the center and surrounding yourself the different personal strengths that you embody and tap into and demonstrate in your life. You could do it for different values or core values. You could do it for different groups or organizations, showing your relationship to the different communities that you're a part of, different groups or organizations you're a part of. You can even do it for different intersecting identities. What's your relationship to your race? What's your relationship to your age? What's your relationship to your gender, to your sexuality, to your socioeconomic status, and all the different layers of identity? So the social atom can be used as an assessment, an intervention, an evaluation tool. You can do it at different points in the treatment progress and compare them to see changes in one's social life. You can modify it into a role atom and draw all the different roles that you hold in your life rather than the different social relationships in your life. Social atom can be used as a warm-up to a psychodrama or to psychodramatic sculpting. So we could have someone or everyone in the group draw their social atoms and then get a protagonist from the group and then concretize their social atom by having them choose different people in the room to play the different roles and the different people that they drew on their social atom. And they can symbolically represent those relationships in the space of the group room or the stage, using body posture and closeness and distance, and even different nonverbal cues or even verbal messages to and from each of the roles and themselves. And this can be a entire group process on its own. Oftentimes it's done as a family of origin sculpting, and it can be a warm-up into a larger psychodrama. Now, the second important sociometric concept or model, we'll say, is called a sociogram. And so, whereas the social atom depicts the individual in their social environment, and it's person-centered, it's focused on an individual, the sociogram depicts the group as a whole sociodynamics, and it's focused and centered on the group as a whole, rather than an individual within that group. So Moreno created what he called sociometric tests, where he would ask members of a group or a community a sociometric question or prompt. And he would ask them to choose someone else in the group as the answer to that question. For example, who would you like to share a meal with at lunch in this group? Who would you like to go on vacation with? Who would you like to co-facilitate a group with? Who would you like to learn more about? Who here do you feel like has really helped you the most since you've been here? All these different questions could be sociometric prompts. And originally, Moreno would do these through pen to paper responses. He would ask everybody in the group to answer the same sociometric prompt. Sometimes he would complicate it and ask participants to create a list in order of preference and list multiple group members as in order of preference to the prompt. So who would be the top 3 people in the group that you would like to share a room with, or that you would like to be part of a group with. And he would take these responses from the sociometric test and he would draw out complicated sociograms depicting the distribution of choices within the group based on that prompt. And so these sociograms provided a visualization of the different sociodynamics within the group, the distribution of social wealth in the group, and it would make it really clear who was the social star or the different social stars in the group based on that criteria, as well as who were the social isolates in the group based on that criteria. Moreno noticed that in every single sociogram and sociometric test that's ever been conducted, that there's always an unequal distribution of choices. That there's some people that get lots of choices, that get chosen a lot, and there's other people that don't get chosen as much or are entirely unchosen. And he described this social phenomenon as the sociodynamic effect. That this underlying phenomenon impacts all groupings of people, therapy groups, organizations, communities, and all of society, and it results in the unequal distribution of resources, of connection, of opportunities. Moreno described the sociodynamic effect as being underlying all problems in society. It fuels racism, it fuels poverty, it fuels discrimination, it fuels war and famine. That this sociodynamic effect shows up in all groups, and that part of our responsibility as group leaders and organizational leaders is to be aware of this sociodynamic effect and to actively work to reverse it within the group, redistribute the social wealth, the opportunities, the resources, and choices. And this sociodynamic effect underlies many, most, maybe all traumatic experiences through the unequal distribution of wealth or money or food or attention or love or opportunity, that neglect, abandonment, loss, violence, these are all fueled by the sociodynamic effect. Now, the positive side of this is that in these sociometric tests, Moreno also noticed a different concept, a different phenomenon that he called tele, T-E-L-E. And he uses this term to label this phenomenon that also emerged in all groups and all sociometric tests. And it resulted in the reciprocal and mutual choices between individuals in the group at a rate that was much higher than expected or even predicted based on chance. That as humans, we tend to gravitate towards each other and to mutually choose each other, that there's a reciprocity in our experience of each other that is far more unexpected than expected, and that it happens far more than what a computer would predict based on probability statistics. That in every sociometric test, if you were to predict what's the chance of two people choosing each other on this prompt, or what's the chance of somebody choosing three different people and those three different people also choosing them, and you do the probability statistics, and then you go and actually ask the group these sociometric prompts and compare how often mutual choices happen in real groups versus how often a computer would predict them to happen based on probability, that they're always going to happen more often in real groups, far more often. Moreno described this as a socio-gravitational force that brings us together more often than we would come together by chance. It's perhaps the mechanism by which synchronicity takes place. And tele shows up in psychodrama, not just in sociometry. It often shows up in the choices of roles, that we ask a protagonist to pick someone to play the role of your father. And they look around the group, and this one person just seems to catch their eye, and they say, I want you to play the role of my father. And they don't know anything about that person, but that person comes up, plays the role of their father, and they both have a really powerful experience in the roles. And then afterwards, in the sharing process, the role player shares with the protagonist and says how powerful playing the role of their father was. That they were struggling with their own relationship with their father or their own relationship with their child. And that it seemed a synchronicity that they got chosen to play that role because it was so meaningful for them in their own experience. We would call this tele. So tele is the opposite of transference. Tele is a two-way, accurate seeing, being, and feeling, experiencing of another person. Whereas transference is a one-way distortion of reality, a distortion of the relationship. So you could think of one of the purposes of all groups, organizations, leadership, and even one-to-one therapy as to help work through the different projections and transferences in the group in order to get to the telic connection that exists underneath of the transference. That all wholesome, healthy, and healing relationships are based on tele. So these sociograms, Moreno used them in large communities. He used them in the prisons. He first envisioned them in a refugee camp that he worked in. He later had the chance to use them in the military. He used them in educational settings and in businesses and in his own psychiatric hospital. And he was able to predict disconnections and losses in groups based on his sociometric tests and his sociograms. He could tell who the social isolate was in the group after some simple drawing some simple sociograms, and was able to predict who was most likely to leave an organization, leave a community, or leave a group based on who were the isolates in the group. So the sociograms became pretty popular in the sociology field, and they ended up becoming the foundation for social network theories, as well as for participatory action research. So Moreno is often credited as a forerunner of social network theory and participatory action research. One of Moreno's most popular quotes, and it's at the beginning of his book, Who Shall Survive, which is one of his most popular books. It was published in 1934, and it outlines his sociometric research. The quote is page 3. A truly therapeutic procedure cannot have less an objective than the whole of mankind. But no adequate therapy can be prescribed as long as mankind is not a unity in some fashion, and as long as its organization remains unknown. So Moreno really believed that one-to-one therapy was not enough, that we had to create healing in larger groups, communities, organizations, and we had to work towards societal change. He had a vision that he called Sociometry, healing for society. And he really believed that we need to create therapeutic procedures that addressed societal problems and suffering and dysfunction within all of society. But that we couldn't create these types of therapies, group therapies, community therapies, and ways of creating change in community and society until we first understood the underlying structures within groups and societies, the underlying sociodynamics. And this is why he created his sociometric theory, sociometric research, and sociometric interventions. And we'll talk more about the interventions in chapter 4 of this book. So some questions to reflect on. If we were to generate a sociogram of your group, of your community, of your organization, or your team or department, who would be the people who are the social stars of that sociogram? And who would be the social isolates in that group? How can you, as a leader, a group leader, organizational leader, how can you contribute to reversing the sociodynamic effect within your groups, within your organizations, within your communities, within your team? By now, I've adequately covered how Moreno's theories and philosophies, as well as the theories and philosophies in group work, are not only can be used as trauma-focused treatments, but also are frameworks that are congruent with the trauma-informed care philosophy. And that these frameworks are applicable work with individuals, groups, communities, organizations, and all of society. That while group work approaches, theories and ideas, and psychodramatic theories and approaches were created long before trauma-informed principles were articulated by SAMHSA, that they really mirror each other, that these trauma-informed principles and trauma-informed care philosophy are both embodied in group work as an approach and as a theoretical system, and embodied in psychodramatic philosophies and psychodrama as an approach. So I hope you found this video useful. This is, again, providing an overview to the content in Chapter 2 in my new book, Trauma-Informed Principles in Group Therapy, Psychodrama, and Organizations. If you found this video useful, I encourage you to check out some of the other videos on the channel here. I'm going to create a video going through all the 12 different chapters in the book. You can get the book through the publisher, Routledge, Taylor & Francis, or on Amazon. If you find the book useful, it would be really helpful to me and to future readers of the book to write an honest Amazon review of the book. It only takes a couple minutes. Writing an honest Amazon review is by far the most helpful thing you could possibly do for an author or for a book to help new people find that book. So thanks for listening, and I hope you found this information useful in your work.